Commander Ethan Cole woke to the smell of burning metal and the taste of blood in his mouth. And for a long moment, he did not know where he was or what had happened to him. The shuttle had crashed. That much was clear from the twisted wreckage that surrounded him on all sides. And the emergency lights flickered red and orange like dying stars in the darkness. He tried to move and pain shot through his left arm like fire. But he forced himself to sit up anyway because a soldier did not stay down when there was work to be done. Status report. He called out to the darkness. But no voice answered him, and the silence told him everything he needed to know about the fate of his crew. Ethan crawled through the broken hull of the shuttle and pulled himself out into the open air of an alien world. And the forest around him was unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth. The trees were tall and silver, their leaves glowing with soft blue light. And strange creatures watched him from the shadows with eyes that reflected like mirrors in the darkness. Creatures watched him from the shadows with eyes that reflected like mirrors in the darkness. Reflected like mirrors in the darkness was supposed to be on a diplomatic mission. One of the first humans to visit the Sithara Dominion, an ancient empire that had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years before humanity had even discovered fire. But something had gone wrong during their approach to Velanthi Prime. And now Ethan was alone on a forest moon with no communication equipment and no way to call for help. He checked his survival pack and found that most of his supplies had survived the crash, including his medical kit and his emergency rations and a small plasma pistol that all soldiers carried on diplomatic missions. The air was breathable and the temperature was comfortable, which meant he could survive here for weeks if he needed to. But he did not plan to wait that long. Ethan began walking through the silver forest, searching for any sign of civilization or any way to contact the convoy that had been traveling with him through space. He had walked for nearly an hour when he saw the second crash site, and his heart jumped in his chest because this was not a human vessel. The escape pod was sleek and elegant, made from materials that shimmered like liquid metal, and it bore the royal seal of the Sithara Dominion on its damaged hull. Ethan approached carefully with his pistol drawn because he did not know what he would find inside. And what he found was a dying alien princess bleeding silver blood onto the floor of her ruined ship. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are often beautiful, with skin the color of pale moonlight and hair like spun darkness. And her eyes, when they opened, were the deep purple of distant nebulae. "Human," she whispered. And her voice was weak but filled with surprise. "What are you doing here on this world?" "Same thing as you," Ethan said as he knelt beside her, crashing and trying not to die. He could see that she was badly injured, with a piece of metal shrapnel buried deep in her side. And the silver blood that pooled beneath her was not clotting the way blood should. "Do not waste your time on me," she said, and her voice carried the weight of someone who had accepted their death. "I carry the curse of my bloodline, and my wounds will not heal." Ethan ignored her words and opened his medical kit, pulling out scanners and bandages and the emergency supplies that every human medic carried into unknown territory. "What is your name?" he asked as he began examining her wound. "I am Princess Kalith Varansa, third daughter of the Eternal Queen," she answered. "And you are foolish to help me when you could be saving yourself." "I am Commander Ethan Cole of Earth," he replied. "And where I come from, we do not leave people to die when we can help them." His scanner told him things that made his stomach turn with worry, because her biology was failing in ways he had never seen before. The Sitharans had silver blood that was famous throughout the galaxy for its beauty and its purity. But that same blood lacked the ability to heal itself the way human blood could. Kalith's body could not form the clots needed to stop her bleeding, and no amount of bandages would save her from slowly draining away into death. Ethan sat back and thought about what he knew about human biology and alien biology and the desperate measures that medics sometimes had to take in impossible situations. Human blood was considered primitive by most galactic species, thick and red and filled with aggressive cells that attacked anything foreign that entered the body. But those same aggressive cells were also the reason humans could survive wounds that would kill other species. Because human blood fought to keep its host alive with a ferocity that bordered on miraculous. "I have an idea," Ethan said slowly. "But it is dangerous and it might kill us both." "I'm already dying," Kellis replied. "So what do I have to lose?" Ethan pulled out his transfusion kit and began preparing his own arm for the procedure. And Kellis watched him with confusion in her purple eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I am going to give you my blood," he explained. "Human blood has properties that yours does not, and it might be able to help your body heal itself." "That is impossible," she said. "Our species are not compatible and your blood will be rejected by my body." "Maybe," Ethan admitted. "Or maybe human blood is too stubborn to know when it should fail." He made the connection between their veins and began the transfusion, watching as his red blood flowed into her silver veins. And he prayed to whatever gods might be listening that he was not making a terrible mistake. First few minutes were agony for both of them, with Kelith gasping in pain as foreign cells entered her system, and Ethan growing dizzy as his own blood left his body. But then something miraculous began to happen. Something that neither of them had expected. The wound in Calif's side began to close, the flesh knitting together as if guided by invisible hands. And the bleeding stopped for the first time since she had crashed by the stars. Calith whispered as she watched her own body heal. This is not possible, but it was happening anyway, because human blood did not care what was possible and what was not. Ethan watched until he was sure she would survive. And then he disconnected the transfusion and collapsed beside her on the floor of the escape pod. He had given too much of himself, and his vision was going dark around the edges. But he could see that Kelith was sitting up now, her wounds healed and her strength returning. "You saved my life," she said. And there was wonder in her voice that made her sound young despite her ancient heritage. "You gave me your own blood to save a stranger. That is what humans do," Ethan managed to say before unconsciousness took him. "We help people." He did not know then that his act of kindness would change the fate of two civilizations. And he did not know that the blood he had given would make him the most valuable person in the galaxy. All he knew was that he had saved a life. And that was enough for now. Kelith sat beside the unconscious human and watched him breathe. And she felt something she had never felt before in her long and privileged life. She felt a debt that she did not know how to repay. And she felt the first stirrings of something that might have been called respect. The rescue ships arrived 3 days later, descending from the sky like silver birds with engines that hummed with power beyond anything human technology could produce. Ethan had recovered enough to stand by then, and Kelith had stayed by his side the entire time, sharing her emergency rations with him and talking to him about the stars and the worlds she had seen. She told him about the Sithara Dominion, an empire that had existed for 10,000 years, ruled by her mother, the eternal Queen Visirith Varansa, who had sat on the throne for 3 millennia. She told him about the curse that ran through royal blood, a genetic flaw that made their bodies beautiful but fragile, unable to heal from wounds that other species would survive easily. And she told him that what he had done should have been impossible, that human blood should have been rejected by her body and killed them both. "But you are alive," Ethan said simply. "And that is all that matters." When the rescue ships landed, Scytheran soldiers poured out in their elegant armor of silver and black, and they surrounded Ethan with weapons raised as if he were a threat to be contained. "Stand down," Kelith commanded, and her voice carried the authority of royalty that made even trained soldiers hesitate. "This human saved my life, and you will treat him with respect." The soldiers lowered their weapons, but they did not stop watching Ethan with suspicious eyes. and he understood that he was something they had never seen before, a human who had touched royal blood and lived. Journey to the Scytheran throne world took 2 weeks in faster-than-light travel. And during that time, Ethan was treated as a guest of honor with comfortable quarters and good food and access to the ship's library, but he noticed the guards were always posted outside his door, and that he was never allowed to wander the ship alone. And he began to wonder if he was truly a guest or something else entirely. When they arrived at Sithar Prime, Ethan looked out the viewport and felt his breath catch in his throat at the beauty of what he saw. The planet was covered in silver forests and crystal oceans, with cities that rose like sculptures of light and metal, and orbital stations that circled the world like jeweled rings. This was the heart of an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. And Ethan was just one small human standing in the shadow of something far greater than himself. They brought him to the Viride palace in a shuttle that flew over gardens of impossible flowers and fountains that flowed with liquid light. And everywhere he looked, he saw Scytherans watching him with curiosity and something that might have been hunger. The throne room was vast beyond measure, with ceilings so high they disappeared into darkness and pillars carved from stone that seemed to glow from within. And there on a throne of crystal and silver sat the eternal queen herself, ancient and beautiful and terrifying in ways that made Ethan's human heart beat faster with fear of Acerith. Varansa looked like her daughter, but older, with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. And she studied Ethan the way a scientist might study an interesting new specimen. "So this is the human who saved my daughter's life," she said, and her voice echoed through the chamber like music made of ice. "Come closer so that I may see you properly." Ethan walked forward until he stood at the base of the throne, and he bowed his head in respect because he understood that he was in the presence of power beyond anything Earth had ever known. "Your Majesty," he said, "I am honored to stand before you." "You should be," the queen replied, and there was no warmth in her words. "My daughter tells me that you gave her your own blood to save her life, that your primitive human biology somehow healed wounds that our medicine could not." "I did what any medic would do," Ethan answered. "I saw someone dying and I tried to help." The queen leaned forward on her throne, and her purple eyes seemed to pierce through him like blades of light. "Our scientists have examined my daughter since her return," she said, "and what they found has changed everything we thought we knew about your species." She gestured with one elegant hand, and holographic displays appeared in the air around Ethan, showing medical data and genetic analyses and things he could not understand. "Human blood contains properties that our kind has been searching for since the curse first appeared in our bloodline thousands of years ago," the queen continued. "Your cells are aggressive and adaptable, and they fight to survive with a strength we have never seen in any other species. I am pleased that I could help," Ethan said carefully, because something in the queen's tone was making him nervous. "You have done more than help," the queen said. "You have shown us the key to our survival as a species, and for that you have my gratitude." She smiled then, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had found exactly what she was looking for. "You will remain here on Sithara as my guest," she announced. "You will be given every comfort and every luxury that our empire can provide." Ethan felt ice form in his stomach at her words. "Your Majesty, I thank you for your generosity, but I must return to Earth," he said. "My people will be looking for me, and I have duties that I must fulfill." "Your duties are here now," the queen replied, and her voice hardened like steel. "Your blood is too valuable to be wasted on a primitive world that does not understand its worth. I am not a resource to be used," Ethan said, and he heard the anger in his own voice. "I am a person with rights and freedoms that even empires must respect," the queen laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "You humans are so young," she said. "You think that rights are given by nature, but rights are given by power. and I have more power than your entire species combined." She raised her hand and guards appeared from the shadows, surrounding Ethan with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. "You will be taken to quarters befitting your importance," the Queen commanded. "You will be well treated, and your needs will be met. But you will not leave this world until I say you may leave." "This is kidnapping," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "This is an act of war against Earth. This is survival," the Queen replied. "My people have been dying for thousands of years, and you are the first hope we have found in all that time. Do you really think I will let you walk away?" Ethan looked around at the guards and the Queen and the vast throne room of an alien empire, and he understood that he had no power here, that he was trapped in a cage made of gold and silver. "Callus saved my life as surely as I saved hers," the Queen added. "So consider us even, Commander Cole, and make peace with your new home." They led him away then, through corridors of light and beauty, to chambers that were more luxurious than anything he had ever seen on Earth. But the doors locked behind him and the windows would not open. And Ethan knew that no matter how beautiful his prison was, it was still a prison. He sat on a bed made of clouds and silk and looked out at the alien sky. And he made a promise to himself that he would find a way to escape. He was human. And humans did not give up, not ever. Not even when the whole galaxy stood against them. Somewhere in the palace, Princess Calith heard what her mother had done. As she felt shame burn in her heart like fire, she owed the human her life. And this was how her family repaid him. She did not know yet what she would do about it. But she knew that she could not let this stand. The weeks passed slowly in his gilded cage, and Ethan learned the rhythms of his captivity, like a prisoner learns the walls of their cell. Every 3 days, the medical technicians would come to his chambers with their silver instruments and their cold professional manner, and they would take his blood for the research that the Queen commanded. They were always polite, and they always thanked him for his cooperation. But Ethan knew that his cooperation was not truly required, because they would take what they needed whether he agreed or not. Spent his days reading from the vast library that had been provided for him, learning about Scytheran history and culture, and the curse that had plagued their royal bloodline for millennia. The curse had first appeared 5,000 years ago, when the bloodline had been strengthened through generations of selective breeding to produce rulers of perfect beauty and perfect grace. But perfection had come with a price, and that price was fragility. Blood that could not heal itself, and bodies that broke easily under stress. The common Scytherans did not carry the curse as strongly, but the royal family suffered worst of all. And each generation saw more princes and princesses die from wounds that should not have been fatal. The Queen herself was only alive because of ancient technology that sustained her failing body. And her daughters all carried the curse in varying degrees. Ethan understood now why the Queen was so desperate, why she was willing to imprison an innocent man to save her people. But understanding did not mean acceptance, and he refused to stop looking for a way to escape. Princess Calith began visiting him in the 3rd week of his captivity, arriving at his door with guards who waited outside while she sat with him and talked. At first their conversations were awkward and filled with guilt on her part and anger on his. But slowly they began to find common ground. "I argued with my mother for hours after she imprisoned you," Calith told him one evening as they sat by his window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. "I told her that what she did was wrong, that she had no right to cage you like an animal." "And what did she say?" Ethan asked. "She said that a queen must make choices that others cannot understand," Calith replied. "She said that the survival of our species is more important than the freedom of one man, even a man who saved her daughter's life. Do you believe that?" Ethan asked, and he watched her face carefully for signs of deception. Calith was quiet for a long moment before she answered. "I believe my mother loves our people and will do anything to save them," she said. But I also believe that some things are wrong no matter what reasons we give for them. She turned to look at him, and her purple eyes were filled with something that might have been shame. I owe you my life, Ethan Cole, she said, and I am sorry that my family has repaid you with chains instead of gratitude. Then help me escape. Ethan said simply. Calith looked away and did not answer. And Ethan understood that she was torn between her duty to her family and her debt to him. Their conversations continued over the following weeks, and Ethan began to see a different side of the princess than the dying girl he had saved on the forest moon. She was intelligent and curious, fascinated by human culture and human history, and the way humans had achieved so much in such a short time compared to the ancient Scythian Empire. She asked him about Earth, about its blue oceans and green forests, and the billions of humans who lived there in their cities of steel and glass, and she told him about her own life, about growing up in the shadow of her mother's throne and her older sisters, who competed for power while she preferred to study and explore. I was never meant to rule, she admitted one day. I am the third daughter, and the throne will pass to my eldest sister when my mother finally allows herself to rest. So I have always been free to pursue my own interests. What interests you? Ethan asked. Everything, Kella said with a smile that made her look young and full of life. I want to see every world and learn every secret and understand how the universe works. That sounds like a good way to spend eternity, Ethan said. And he found himself smiling back despite his anger at his situation through Calith. Ethan also learned more about the politics of the Scythian court, the factions and rivalries that churned beneath the surface of the elegant empire. There were those who supported the queen, absolutely, and believed that any means were justified to save their dying species. But there were also those who whispered that the queen had ruled too long, that her desperation had made her cruel, and that new leadership was needed to guide the Stithora into a new age. My mother has enemies who would use any weapon against her, Calith warned Ethan, including you. So be careful who you speak to and what you say. Ethan listened and learned and waited for his chance to escape. But the palace security was too strong, and the guards were too vigilant. He tried once in the 6th week, slipping out of his chambers during a changing of the guard and making his way toward the shuttle bays he had seen from his window. But they caught him before he reached the hangar. And the punishment was swift and painful, not physical pain, but the pain of watching his freedoms reduced even further. His library taken away and his window sealed so that he could no longer see the sky. You cannot escape, the queen told him when she came to his chambers after his failed attempt. You are too valuable to lose, and I have prepared for every possibility. Then you will have to keep me caged forever, Ethan replied. Because I will never stop trying. The queen studied him with ancient eyes that had seen countless empires rise and fall. Your stubbornness is remarkable, she said. Most beings would have accepted their fate by now. But you humans seem incapable of surrender. That is because surrender is not in our nature, Ethan said. We fight even when we cannot win, because the fighting itself has value. A curious philosophy, the queen said. Perhaps that is why your blood is so strong. Because it comes from a species that refuses to die quietly. She left him alone then. And Ethan sat in his reduced chambers and planned his next attempt. Keyleth came to see him the next day, and there were tears in her eyes that she tried to hide. I heard what happened, she said. I am so sorry, Ethan. Do not be sorry, Ethan said. I knew the risks when I tried to escape, and I will try again when I find another opportunity. Calith sat beside him and took his hand in hers. And it was the first time she had touched him since the day he saved her life. There may be another way, she said quietly. An old law from before my mother's time that might give you protection. What law? Ethan asked. The law of life debt, Calith explained. It says that when someone saves your life at great personal cost, you become responsible for their well-being, and their honor becomes tied to your own. How does that help me? Ethan asked. Because if I invoke the life debt publicly, Kellis said, then your freedom becomes a matter of my honor, and my mother cannot keep you imprisoned without dishonoring our entire bloodline. Ethan looked at her and saw the fear in her eyes. The knowledge that what she was proposing would put her in direct conflict with the most powerful person in the galaxy. Why would you do this for me? Yasked Kalith was quiet for a moment before she answered. Because you saved my life without asking for anything in return, she said. Because you gave me your own blood when you did not know if it would kill you. And because when I look at you, I see the kind of person I want to be. She squeezed his hand and met his eyes with determination. I cannot promise it will work, she said. But I can promise that I will try. Ethan felt hope stir in his chest for the first time since his imprisonment began. And he understood that he had found an ally in the most unlikely of places, a princess of the empire that had enslaved him. The day of the declaration came on a morning when the twin suns of Sithara, prime rose red and gold over the crystal spires of the Palace Akilith, had spent weeks preparing, gathering allies among the younger nobles who believed that the empire needed to change, and building support among those who remembered the old laws that even queens were supposed to follow. Ethan watched from his sealed chambers as servants rushed through the corridors outside, preparing for a gathering of the high court that happened only once every decade. This was the moment when the great families came together to pledge their loyalty to the throne. And it was the perfect stage for what Kelith intended to do. The guards came for him at noon, escorting him to the great hall where the court had assembled in all their finery of silver and starlight. Thousands of Sitharans filled the vast chamber. Nobles and servants and soldiers alike, all gathered to witness whatever drama was about to unfold. The queen sat on her throne at the head of the hall, dressed in robes that seemed to be made of liquid moonlight, and her daughters stood behind her in order of age. Kelith was the last in line, the third daughter who had never been considered important until now. Bring the human forward, the queen commanded, and the guards pushed Ethan through the crowd until he stood at the base of the throne. Whispers rippled through the assembly as they looked at him. This strange alien creature, whose blood had become the most valuable substance in the empire. Today we celebrate the unity of the Sitharan people, the queen announced in a voice that filled the hall like thunder. And we look forward to a future where the curse that has plagued our bloodline will finally be cured. She gestured toward Ethan and smiled her cold predator smile. This human has given us hope, she continued. His blood contains the key to our salvation, and he has graciously agreed to remain on Sithara to help us in our research. Ethan wanted to shout that he had agreed to nothing, that he was a prisoner being displayed like a trophy, but he knew that speaking out of turn would only make things worse. The queen continued her speech, talking about the glorious future of the Sitharan Empire and the discoveries that would be made using human blood. But Ethan was not listening anymore. He was watching Kelith, who had stepped away from her sisters and was walking toward the center of the hall with steady purpose. Mother, she called out in a voice that cut through the queen's words like a blade. I must speak. The hall fell silent as everyone turned to look at the youngest princess, and the queen's eyes narrowed with displeasure. This is not the time for interruptions. Daughter, she said coldly, I invoke the law of life debt, Kelith declared, and her voice rang through the chamber like a bell. Before the assembled court and all the great families, I declare that Commander Ethan Cole saved my life at great personal cost, and that I am bound to him by the ancient law. Gasps echoed through the crowd as the nobles realized what was happening. Under the law that existed before your reign, Kelith continued, his freedom is my honor and his imprisonment is my shame. And I cannot stand by while my family dishonors itself by treating our savior as a slave. The queen rose from her throne, and the fury in her eyes was terrible to behold. You dare invoke the old laws against me, She hissed. "I am your mother and your queen, and you will not make a mockery of this court." "I dare because it is right," Keleth replied. And she did not flinch from her mother's rage. "You taught me that honor is the foundation of our civilization, that without honor we are no better than the beasts that crawl in the darkness between stars." She turned to face the assembled nobles and spread her arms wide. "I ask you all," she called out, "is it honorable to imprison a man who nearly died saving a princess? Is it honorable to take his blood against his will and cage him like an animal while we call him a guest?" The whispers in the crowd grew louder as the nobles debated among themselves. And Ethan could see that Keleth had struck a nerve the Scytherans valued honor above almost everything else. And the Queen's treatment of him had always been a moral compromise that many were uncomfortable with. "The law of life-debt has not been invoked in 1,000 years, one of the elder nobles called out. "Does it still have force in our modern age?" "The law was never repealed," another noble replied. "It is still written in the founding documents of our civilization." The Queen raised her hand, and the hall fell silent again. "My daughter speaks of honor," she said, and her voice dripped with contempt. "But what of the honor owed to our own people? What of the children who die because their blood cannot heal them? The parents who bury sons and daughters taken before their time?" She pointed at Ethan with one long finger. "This human's blood can save millions of Scytheran lives," she declared. "Is his freedom worth more than the lives of our children?" It was a powerful argument, and Ethan could see the nobles wavering as they considered the Queen's words. But then Keleth spoke again, and what she said changed everything. "Mother, you speak of saving lives, but you do not speak of how you intend to do it," she said. "Will you keep this one human prisoner forever? And when he dies, as all humans eventually do, what then?" She walked toward her mother until they stood face to face, princess and queen. "Daughter and mother, Earth has billions of humans," Keleth continued. "And if you take one prisoner, they will never trust us, they will never help us, and we will have made enemies of the one species that might have saved us willingly. They are too primitive to threaten us." The Queen scoffed. "They are primitive today," Keleth agreed. "But they are growing, Mother. They are young and hungry, and they learn faster than any species in the galaxy. And in 1,000 years, they will remember how we treated their hero." She turned back to the court, and her voice rose with passion. "We have a choice today," she declared. "We can be tyrants who take what we want and create enemies who will hate us for generations. Or we can be honorable partners who build alliances that will last forever." The debate that followed went on for hours, with nobles arguing on both sides and the Queen growing more furious with each passing minute. Finally, the eldest of the family patriarchs, a Scytheran so old that his silver blood had turned his skin almost transparent, rose to speak. "I remember when the law of life-debt was last invoked," he said in a voice like dry leaves. "It was a matter of honor then, and it is a matter of honor now. The princess speaks truth, and the law is clear." He turned to the Queen and bowed his ancient head. "Your Majesty, I have served your family for 3,000 years, and I advise you now as I have always advised you. Do not sacrifice our honor for short-term gain. It will poison everything that comes after." The Queen stood alone on her throne, surrounded by a court that was turning against her. And Ethan saw something he had never expected to see in her ancient eyes. "Doubt. This is not over," she said finally, her voice cold as the void between stars. "But for today, the human may have his freedom to move within the palace." It was not the victory they had hoped for, but it was a start. Keleth turned to Ethan and smiled, and he saw exhaustion and relief and something else in her eyes, something that looked like hope. "We have won the first battle," she whispered. "But the war is just beginning." Ethan nodded and took her hand. And together they walked out of the great hall while the nobles watched and whispered about the princess who had defied the eternal queen. The empire was divided now, split between those who supported the queen's desperate measures and those who believed in the old honor that Chelith represented. And at the center of it all was one human man whose blood had started a revolution. The months that followed were filled with tension and conflict as the Scythian Empire tore itself apart from within Chelith. Gathered supporters among the young nobles and the common people who were tired of the queen's ancient grip on power, while the queen rallied her loyalists and reminded them of the dangers that humanity posed in their way of life. Ethan found himself at the center of a civil war he had never asked to start, a symbol for both sides of everything they loved or feared about change. He had been given freedom to move within the palace, but not to leave, and he used that freedom to learn everything he could about Scythian politics and culture and the weaknesses of the queen's position. At night, he would meet with Chelith in secret gardens where the flowers glowed with soft light, and they would talk about strategy and hope and the future they might build together. "My mother sent assassins after me last week," Chelith told him one evening, her voice calm despite the terror of what she was describing. "They were from a faction loyal to my eldest sister, who sees this conflict as her chance to secure the throne. Are you safe?" Ethan asked, feeling fear grip his heart at the thought of losing her. "I am protected by those who believe in our cause," Chelith replied. "But I do not know how long this stalemate can continue before blood is spilled in the streets." Ethan had been thinking about this problem for weeks, turning it over in his mind like a puzzle that refused to be solved. Violence would only destroy what Chelith was trying to build. And even if she won, the cost would be too high. There had to be another way. The answer came to him in the middle of the night, so obvious that he laughed at himself for not seeing it sooner. He was thinking like a prisoner, trying to escape or fight or survive. But he should have been thinking like what he actually was, a diplomat. The next morning he requested an audience with the queen, and to everyone's surprise, including his own, she agreed to see him. He walked into her private chambers alone, without guards or allies, and found her sitting by a window that looked out over the empire she had ruled for 3,000 years. She looked tired in a way he had never seen before, the weariness of someone who had carried a burden too heavy for too long. "You wanted to see me, human?" she asked without turning to face him. "I have a proposal," Ethan said. "A way to end this conflict that gives everyone what they need." The queen laughed bitterly and finally turned to look at him. "And what do you think I need?" she asked. "You need to save your people," Ethan replied. "That has been your only goal since the beginning. Everything else has just been means to that end. And you think you can offer me salvation?" she asked with scorn in her voice. "I think Earth can," Ethan said. "Not just my blood, but the blood of millions of humans who would volunteer to help an alien species if they were asked nicely instead of threatened." He stepped closer to her throne and spoke with all the conviction he could muster. "Let me contact Earth," he said. "Let me propose an alliance between our peoples. A trade agreement where humans provide blood and medical assistance in exchange for Scythian technology and partnership. You would help us after everything we did to you?" the queen asked, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "I would help your people because they deserve to live," Ethan replied. "And I would help you because I understand why you did what you did, even if I can never forgive it." The queen was silent for a long moment, considering his words. "Even if Earth agreed," she said finally, "my people would never accept charity from primitives." "It would not be charity," Ethan said. "It would be a partnership. Humans give blood that heals. Scythians give technology that advances. Both species benefit and both species grow stronger." He paused and then played his final card. "But there is one condition that is not negotiable," he said. "You must step down from the throne and allow Keleth to rule in your place." The queen's eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, Ethan thought she would call the guards and have him executed on the spot. "You dare demand my abdication?" she hissed. "I dare because it is the only way forward," Ethan said calmly. "You have ruled for 3,000 years, and in that time you have become willing to do terrible things in the name of survival. Your people need a leader who will build bridges instead of cages." He met her ancient eyes without flinching. "I am not asking you to admit defeat," he continued. "I am asking you to trust your daughter to finish what you started, to save your people through cooperation instead of conquest." The queen rose from her chair and walked to the window, staring out at the world she had protected for longer than most civilizations had existed. "You know nothing of sacrifice," she whispered. "You cannot imagine what it means to watch your children die one by one, to feel your own body failing while the curse takes everything you love." "You are right," Ethan admitted. "I cannot imagine that pain. But I know that the answer is not more pain, more imprisonment, more enemies." He walked to stand beside her at the window. "Let me help you," he said softly. "Let humanity help you, not because we are forced to, but because we choose to." The queen did not answer for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with exhaustion. "I've been fighting for so long," she said. "I do not know how to stop, and let someone else carry the burden for a while." Ethan replied. The coronation happened 1 month later, on a day when the whole empire gathered to witness the end of one era and the beginning of another. Queen Viserith stood before her people one last time and announced that she was stepping down, that she had found hope for the future in the most unlikely of places, and that she trusted her daughter Keleth to guide the Scytheran people into a new age. Keleth received the crown with tears in her eyes and the cheers of millions ringing in her ears. And her first act as queen was to announce the alliance with Earth that would save her species. Ethan watched from the crowd as the woman he had saved became the ruler of an empire, and he felt pride and joy and something else that he was not quite ready to name after the ceremony. Keleth found him standing alone in one of the palace gardens. "I owe you everything," she said. "My life, my crown, the future of my people. Stay with me, and I will give you anything you desire." Ethan smiled and took her hand gently. "You owe me nothing," he said. "We are even now, your freedom for mine." "You are leaving?" she asked, and he heard the pain in her voice. "I have to," he replied. "Earth needs to know what happened here, and I am the only one who can tell them. But this is not goodbye forever." He squeezed her hand and looked into her purple eyes. "There is a life debt between us, remember?" he said with a grin. "That means you are stuck with me, whether you like it or not." Keleth laughed and pulled him into an embrace that lasted longer than either of them expected. "Go then," she whispered. "Go back to your people and tell them that they have friends among the stars." The shuttle that carried Ethan back to Earth was a Scytheran vessel of silver and light, faster than anything humanity had ever built as it lifted off from the palace and rose through the atmosphere. Keleth's voice came through the communication system, warm and amused. "You realize, Commander, that a life debt is never truly repaid," she said. "I will find you again." Ethan smiled as the stars appeared around him, billions of lights in the infinite darkness. And he thought about everything that had happened since he crashed on a forest moon and gave his blood to save a dying princess. He had started a revolution, ended a queen's reign, forged an alliance between species, and found something that might be love in the most unexpected place. "Not bad for a primitive human. I am counting on it," he replied. And the shuttle jumped to faster than light speed, carrying him home behind him. A new queen looked up at the sky and smiled, knowing that the universe had just become a much more interesting place, and somewhere in the depths of space, humanity was about to learn that they were not alone, that they had allies among the stars, and that their blood was worth more than all the gold in the galaxy. The age of humanity had just begun.